Our timeline of human history is wrong. Groundbreaking archaeological discoveries are forcing a complete rewrite of the story we think we know. This journey through 25 astonishing finds will fundamentally alter your perception of the past. You will see how entire chapters of our history need to be torn out and replaced. How did a civilization build a temple complex thousands of years before inventing agriculture? What does a 2,000-year-old computer reveal about lost technology? These are not just footnotes, they are direct challenges to the narrative of human progress. What does it mean when the ground beneath our feet holds secrets that contradict everything in our textbooks? Göbekli Tepe stands as a silent, stone rebuttal to a story we thought was settled. For generations, the narrative was straightforward and logical. Humans first mastered farming, which created a stable food surplus. This surplus allowed people to settle in one place, which in turn led to the growth of villages, then cities, and with that growth came the spare time and social structures necessary for complex religion and monumental building. It was a clean cause and effect progression. Göbekli Tepe shatters that sequence. Here, on a windswept plateau, are immense T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, arranged into great stone circles. They are carved with breathtaking artistry, depicting a menagerie of powerful animals in exquisite detail. The construction of this place required a staggering communal effort, a workforce that had to be fed, housed, and organized. And the carbon dating is unequivocal. This complex was being erected around 11,600 years ago, a full 6,000 years before Stonehenge, and at least a millennium before the widespread adoption of agriculture in the region. These builders were not farmers living in a settled town. They were, by all archaeological evidence, hunter-gatherers. This turns the established theory completely inside out. It suggests a profound and radical possibility. What if the catalyst for civilization was not economics, but something deeper? What if the primal human drive to come together for a shared spiritual purpose, to build something permanent and awe-inspiring for their beliefs, created the necessity for permanent settlement and organized labor? The very need to feed the workers building Göbekli Tepe could have been the pressure that sparked experiments with cultivating wild grains. In this light, agriculture was not the cause of complex society, but one of its first and most important tools. This site forces us to reconsider the origins of everything we associate with civilization. It asks us if the first blueprints for our world were not drawn in fields of wheat, but in circles of sacred stone. That same sense of a lost chapter in human knowledge emerges from the depths of the Aegean Sea, not in grand architecture, but in intricate miniature perfection. In 1901, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the remains of an ancient Roman shipwreck. Among the statues and ceramics, they recovered a corroded, lumpy object about the size of a large book, made of bronze and what remained of wood. For decades, it sat in a museum in Athens, labeled as a curious but unremarkable artifact, perhaps a navigational instrument. It was only in the latter half of the 20th century, with the advent of X-ray and later advanced imaging techniques, that researchers could see inside the calcified mass. What they revealed was nothing short of breathtaking. This was not a simple tool. It was an astonishingly complex machine, a clockwork device of at least 30 precisely interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case with dials and inscriptions on its face. We now know it as the Antikythera mechanism, and it dates to around 100 years before the Common Era. This object was, in essence, an ancient Greek analog computer. By turning a hand crank on its side, an operator could align the gears to calculate and display the movements of the sun and moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of the known planets, and even indicate the dates of major athletic games like the Olympics. The engineering is so sophisticated, with gears cut to exacting ratios to mimic celestial cycles, that nothing of comparable complexity would appear again in Europe until the astronomical clocks of the 14th century, over 1,000 years later. The existence of this mechanism shatters another comforting linear story, the one about steady, upward technological progress. Here is clear evidence of a peak of knowledge, a Hellenistic tradition of mechanical genius and astronomical understanding that was somehow lost to the sands of time, or more accurately, to the silts of the sea. It forces a humbling question: this one device survived by sheer chance, preserved in a shipwreck. How many other marvels of ancient engineering were melted down for their metal, or simply crumbled to dust, leaving no trace for us to find? The Antikythera mechanism is a quiet, gear-driven whisper from the past, telling us that our ancestors were far more technologically ambitious than our history books often allow. The precision of the Antikythera mechanism speaks to a world of sophisticated knowledge, but what if that knowledge extended far beyond the stars and into the very contours of our planet? In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map of stunning, perplexing detail. Using source charts he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, his work accurately depicts the coastline of South America with a precision that would have been remarkable for his era. Yet it is the southern portion of the map that ignites a firestorm of debate among researchers and historians. There, below the Atlantic, lies a landmass with a distinctive, jagged coastline. To some scholars, this land bears an uncanny resemblance to the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica, but with a critical and impossible detail. The coastline is shown not as a frozen, glacial wall, but as a detailed, ice-free continent, complete with what appear to be rivers and inlets. The official European discovery of Antarctica would not occur for another 300 years in 1820. Modern scientific surveys using seismic and radar technology have only recently been able to map the actual bedrock topography of Antarctica beneath its miles-thick ice sheets. The shape revealed by that bedrock, the true coastline of the continent, aligns in a startling way with the land drawn by Piri Reis centuries earlier. This presents a staggering possibility. If the interpretation is correct, it suggests the map is a copy of a copy, preserving cartographic data from an ancient civilization that explored and charted Antarctica at a time when its coasts were temperate and green. Geological evidence indicates the last period when Antarctica's coastline could have been ice-free and charted from the sea was thousands of years ago, at the end of the last ice age. The Piri Reis map, therefore, is not merely an old chart. It is a potential artifact of a forgotten epoch of human exploration, a ghostly echo of navigators who sailed the world in a warm climatic window that history has entirely lost. The debate around it is fierce, with many mainstream historians offering alternative explanations, such as the landmass being a speculative or composite drawing of a southern continent. Yet the chilling precision of the correlation remains. This single piece of parchment challenges two fundamental assumptions at once. It questions the timeline of human seafaring achievement, suggesting capabilities far earlier and more extensive than we credit. More profoundly, it hints that catastrophic climate shifts, like the rapid sea level rise at the end of the last glacial period, may have erased not just coastlines but entire chapters of human endeavor. The map asks us a haunting question: how much of our own past is simply waiting, frozen in time, for us to rediscover it? The idea of a forgotten technological age gains a strange and tangible form, not in a grand machine, but in a simple clay jar. In the 1930s, during railway construction near Baghdad, workers uncovered a collection of peculiar artifacts from the Parthian era, a period spanning roughly 250 years before the Common Era to 250 years after. Among the finds was an unassuming object that would later ignite decades of speculation. It was a 13-centimeter tall clay jar sealed with an asphalt stopper. Through this stopper protruded an iron rod suspended inside a rolled copper cylinder. To an untrained eye, it looked like a sealed vessel for storing a scroll or some precious substance. But to a modern observer familiar with basic principles of electricity, its design was eerily familiar. When researchers later filled a replica of the jar with an acidic electrolyte, such as vinegar or grape juice, a small but measurable electric charge was produced between the iron rod and the copper cylinder. This object, now famously known as the Baghdad battery, generates about 1 volt of electricity, roughly the same as a modern AA battery. The immediate and profound question is, what was it for? The artifact offers no manual, no inscription to declare its purpose, leaving its function entirely in the realm of interpretation. Some scholars propose a practical, industrial use. The small voltage could have been used for electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of one metal, like gold or silver, onto the surface of another. A series of these cells linked together could provide enough current to gild a piece of jewelry or plate a small statue, a practice known from the period. Other theories suggest a more mystical application. The mild electric shock could have been used in religious or healing ceremonies, perhaps to create a tingling sensation that was interpreted as a divine touch or a therapeutic effect. There are also more skeptical views that it was simply a storage vessel for sacred scrolls, with the metals serving a different, non-electrical purpose. Yet the compelling possibility remains. If this was indeed an intentional galvanic cell, it represents a concrete understanding of electrochemical principles over 2,000 years ago. This knowledge was not part of a continuous scientific tradition. It appears and then it vanishes from the historical record, not to be formally rediscovered until Alessandro Volta invented his voltaic pile in the year 1800. The Baghdad battery, therefore, is not proof of a lost industrial revolution, but it is a potent symbol of fragmented knowledge. It suggests that in the workshops and temples of the ancient world, individuals were experimenting with the fundamental forces of nature, achieving insights that would not become common understanding for millennia. This single, humble jar disrupts the clean narrative of linear technological progress. It forces us to ask what other sparks of genius, what other practical applications of forgotten principles, were extinguished by the passage of time, leaving behind only cryptic artifacts that challenge our assumptions about the past. Locked away in the rare book library of Yale University rests perhaps the most stubbornly mysterious object ever created by human hands. It is a 240-page codex, bound in vellum, filled from edge to edge with graceful, looping script that no one on earth can read. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a book that has defied understanding for over 600 years. Its text is composed in an alphabet of around 25 distinct characters, arranged into words and sentences with a statistical structure that mirrors a genuine, natural language. Yet it corresponds to no known tongue, living or dead. The writing flows around illustrations that deepen the mystery rather than solve it. There are page after page of botanical drawings depicting plants that are utterly fantastical, with twisted roots, impossible leaf structures, and blooms that belong to no known genus. Other sections show intricate astrological charts with unfamiliar constellations, and strange diagrams of what appear to be interconnected pipes and vessels, like the schematic for an alchemical or biological process. One particularly curious section depicts nude female figures bathing in or emerging from elaborate, green-tinted pools and channels. The entire work is executed with a careful, consistent hand, suggesting it is not random scribble but a deliberate, information-dense document. This is what makes the Voynich manuscript so profoundly unsettling to historians and linguists. It has all the hallmarks of a real, functional text, a pharmacopoeia, an herbal guide, a treatise on natural philosophy, but its content is completely sealed off from us. For over a century, it has been a siren call to the world's greatest puzzle solvers, military cryptographers who broke enemy codes in the Second World War, turned their formidable skills to its pages, and were utterly defeated. Modern supercomputers running complex linguistic analysis have found patterns but no key. Every proposed solution, from a simple cipher to a lost language to an elaborate medieval hoax, has crumbled under scrutiny. The manuscript's very existence poses a radical and humbling challenge to our historical confidence. We are so accustomed to being able to translate, to interpret, to fit the past into frameworks we understand. Here is an artifact that resists all frameworks. It represents a complete system of knowledge, a way of seeing and describing the world that has left no other trace. Were these plants symbolic, or did they represent real botanical knowledge from a tradition now extinct? Were the bathing diagrams part of a forgotten wellness or spiritual practice? We simply do not know. The Voynich manuscript is more than a curious oddity. It is a tangible void in our understanding, a 240-page reminder that the past is not a solved puzzle waiting for us to assemble, but a landscape where entire continents of human thought and expression may have vanished without a whisper. It asks us how many other voices from history are speaking to us in a language we have not only forgotten, but can no longer even recognize as speech. Deep in the humid jungles of Costa Rica, a different kind of mystery lies half buried in the earth, not a manuscript or a machine, but a collection of silent, perfect forms. The stone spheres of the Diquis Delta are an archaeological phenomenon that defies simple explanation. Numbering in the hundreds, these spheres are carved from a hard igneous rock called granodiorite. Their sizes range from that of a bowling ball to colossal orbs over 2 meters across and weighing more than 15 tons. But it is not their size alone that captivates researchers. It is their near-flawless geometry. Many of the spheres are so precisely spherical that modern measurements show deviations of less than a few millimeters. Achieving this level of perfection in stone without metal tools, powered machinery, or even the wheel is a staggering feat of craftsmanship. They were created by a pre-Columbian culture, likely ancestors of the Boruca people, in a window of time from around 300 to 1500 years after the Common Era. The society that produced them left no written records, no grand cities of stone, no Rosetta Stone to translate their intentions. The spheres are their legacy, and they speak in a language of pure, abstract form. Why would a people invest such immense communal effort over generations to shape and move these colossal balls through difficult jungle terrain? The theories are as varied as the spheres themselves. Some researchers propose an astronomical function, suggesting alignments between groups of spheres could have marked solstices or equinoxes, turning the landscape into a vast celestial calendar. Others see them as powerful status symbols, erected by chieftains to demonstrate authority and control over labor and resources, placed near important dwellings or along pathways. A more symbolic interpretation views them as representations of celestial bodies, like the sun or the moon, or perhaps as maps of the cosmos itself, giving physical form to a cosmological belief system. Their true purpose may forever remain just out of reach, a secret held by the culture that vanished into the jungle, yet their existence sends a powerful, unambiguous message. For a long time, the narrative of human achievement placed a heavy emphasis on the so-called cradles of civilization in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Egypt, and China. The monumental works of the ancient Americas were often viewed as separate, perhaps lesser, streams of development. The Costa Rican spheres demolish that outdated perspective. Here, in isolation from the old world, a society developed the sophisticated stone-working techniques, the mathematical understanding of geometry, and the complex social organization necessary to conceive of and execute such a project. This was not a derivative act, it was a brilliant, independent innovation, a testament to the universal human drive to impose order, meaning, and beauty on the world. The spheres challenge us to expand our map of ancient genius. They remind us that profound intellectual and artistic expression was not the exclusive property of any one continent or culture, but a spark that could ignite independently anywhere human curiosity met the raw materials of the earth. From the silent geometry of the spheres, we journey to a tale of whispers and controversy, one that lives in the shadowy borderland between archaeology and legend. High in the remote Bayan-Ha Mountains of China, a story began in 1938 that would become a fixture of ancient astronaut lore. According to the account, a scientific expedition led by a professor named Kai Pu-Te entered a system of caves and made a baffling discovery. Scattered across the cave floors were ancient, neatly arranged skeletons, described as being of unusually small stature. But the true enigma lay beside them, hundreds of stone discs, each roughly a foot across, with a perfect hole in the center. These were not simple stones. Each disc was said to be carved with a fine, continuous spiral groove that, upon closer inspection, was actually a line of minuscule, hieroglyphic-like characters. The narrative that unfolded from this point is where mainstream science parts ways with the story. As the tale goes, the discs, later called the Dropa stones, were eventually deciphered. Their inscriptions allegedly told a spectacular story of a group of beings called the Dropa whose spacecraft crashed in the mountains thousands of years ago, unable to return home. The stranded survivors, the story claims, were the source of the unusual skeletons found in the cave. This is the core of a modern myth that has captivated imaginations for decades, a story of prehistoric alien contact etched in stone. The vast majority of archaeologists and historians dismiss the entire account. No reputable institution has ever examined the discs. The original expedition leader cannot be verified, and the story bears many hallmarks of a 20th century fabrication, emerging and evolving through sensationalist publications. The likely truth is far more terrestrial, a blend of possible misinterpretation of real but mundane artifacts, like ancient Bai discs which are circular jade artifacts with holes, woven into an elaborate science fiction narrative. Yet, the stubborn persistence of the Dropa legend is itself a fascinating cultural artifact. It speaks less about ancient astronauts and more about a profound and very human yearning. In the face of history's great unanswered questions, there is a powerful temptation to fill the gaps with extraordinary explanations. When we confront something as mystifying as the Voynich manuscript or the purpose of Göbekli Tepe, the idea of an outside influence, a helping hand from the stars, can seem like a compelling shortcut. The Dropa story, whether fact or fiction, challenges us on a different level. It forces a critical examination of how we, as a society, navigate the line between open-minded inquiry and credulous belief. Why do some unverified tales take such powerful root while verified? Earth-shattering discoveries like the Antikythera mechanism remain relatively obscure. It highlights the role of narrative, the deep need for stories that are not just explanatory but wondrous. This legend endures not because of its evidence, but because it taps into a timeless question written in our own curiosity. Are we truly alone, and have we ever been? While the stones themselves may be a mirage, the desire they represent is as real as the mountains where they were supposedly found. It is a reminder that our search for the past is always, in part, a search for our place in a cosmos that feels vast and mysterious. High above the ancient Inca capital, the stones of Sacsayhuamán do not simply sit atop one another. They embrace the fortress walls arranged in a monumental zigzag pattern, are a breathtaking symphony in limestone. Each block is a titan, with the largest estimated to weigh over 100 tons, equivalent to the mass of 24 modern cars. Yet the sheer scale is not the true miracle. It is the intimacy of the fit. These colossal stones are carved with such astonishing geometric precision that their edges melt into one another, forming joints so seamless that, as the saying goes, not even a single sheet of paper can slide between them. More than that, the blocks are not simple rectangles. They are polygonal puzzles, each face cut at multiple angles to lock perfectly with its neighbors on all sides, creating a wall that moves as a single, resilient entity during the frequent earthquakes of the Andes. This was accomplished without the wheel for transport, without iron for cutting tools, and without mortar to fill the gaps. The standard explanations of patient hammering with stone tools and laborious dragging along earthen ramps feel almost insufficient before such perfection. How did the Inca achieve this? The debate is rich with possibility. Some researchers point to a profound understanding of stone's properties, suggesting a technique of heating the rock with fire and then rapidly cooling it with water to create fracture lines, followed by meticulous pecking and grinding with harder stones and abrasive sand. Others propose an almost artistic process where master masons would shape a lower stone, then use a pliable material like clay to take a perfect impression of its top surface. This mold would then be used to guide the carving of the next block, ensuring a flawless match before it was ever lifted into place. This speaks to a staggering degree of foresight and planning. But beyond the how lies the more profound question of the why. This was not merely functional architecture, it was a statement in stone. The interlocking, earthquake-resistant design was a practical necessity, but the seamless, almost organic unity of the walls carried a deeper, cosmological meaning for the Inca. It reflected their worldview of harmony and interconnection, the concept of tinku, the meeting and joining of complementary forces. Sacsayhuamán challenges a persistent, subtle bias in how we view ancient innovation. For too long, the monumental works of the Americas were measured against the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Greece, often framed as impressive but somehow separate from the main narrative of human advancement. These walls dismantle that notion completely. They represent a parallel peak of engineering genius, achieved through a completely independent intellectual and cultural tradition. The Inca solved the same fundamental problems of mass, stability, and precision as their Old World contemporaries, but they arrived at their own brilliant, elegant solutions. Standing before these walls, one does not see primitive labor. One sees applied geometry, sophisticated logistics, and a masterful dialogue between human intention and the enduring soul of the mountain. Sometimes the most profound mysteries are not vast temples, but objects small enough to hold in your hand. In 1936, on a walk near London, Texas, a couple made an ordinary discovery that would become anything but. They found a simple hammer, its wooden handle partially petrified, its iron head firmly embedded in what appeared to be solid rock. The rock itself was identified as a concretion from the Cretaceous period, a formation dating to well over 100 million years old. This presented an impossible, mind-bending contradiction. The hammer, a clear product of human craftsmanship, was sealed inside stone from an era when dinosaurs roamed the earth, a time that ended some 65 million years before the earliest ancestors of humans are thought to have appeared. This artifact, known now as the London Hammer, instantly became a legendary piece of the puzzle for those who study what are called out-of-place artifacts, objects that seem to exist outside of their proper time. On the surface, it appears to be the ultimate anachronism, a piece of modern technology trapped in deep time, suggesting a radical rewrite of not just human history, but of the entire geological timeline. The scientific explanation offered by geologists is more measured but no less fascinating. They propose a process known as concretion. In this scenario, the hammer, perhaps lost by a miner or settler in the 19th century, fell into a mineral-rich creek bed. Over a relatively short period, perhaps just a few centuries, dissolved minerals in the water could have precipitated around the object, cementing it into a hard, stone-like nodule that mimics much older rock. This is a known geological phenomenon where water acts as a natural mason, encasing objects in a tomb of limestone or ironstone. For many researchers, this is the likely and logical conclusion. Yet the story of the London Hammer does not end with a simple geological explanation. Its power lies in the profound questions it forces into the open, regardless of its true age. It became a flagship example because it perfectly illustrates the tension between a single, stubborn piece of evidence and the vast, interlocking framework of established science. What do we do when one artifact seems to break all the rules? The immediate human reaction is often to let the single exception overthrow the entire model. But science and good history must weigh context. An artifact without a clear, documented archaeological context, its precise location in the soil layer, the other objects found with it, is like a sentence ripped from a book. It might be compelling, but its true meaning is lost. The hammer challenges the rigidity of our timelines not by proving them wrong, but by testing the strength of our interpretive methods. It underscores a vital principle for understanding the past. Extraordinary claims do not just require extraordinary evidence, they require that evidence to be scrutinized within its full environmental and historical setting. The London Hammer, therefore, is more than a curious relic. It is a lesson in intellectual humility. It reminds us that the past speaks to us in fragments and whispers, and that our task is not to force those fragments to fit a preferred narrative, whether conventional or revolutionary, but to listen carefully to the whole story the geology, the chemistry, and the human history all have to tell. It asks us to hold two ideas in balance: the courage to question established timelines, and the discipline to seek the most coherent explanation that respects all the evidence. The seamless stones of Sacsayhuamán speak of a mastery over the immediate landscape, but what happens when that ambition is scaled up to encompass the entire horizon? On the stark, wind-scoured plains of southern Peru, an ancient people chose a different canvas. Instead of building upward, they drew. They removed the dark, sun-baked pebbles that coat the desert floor, revealing the lighter-colored earth beneath, and in doing so, they etched a gallery of colossal images into the very skin of the planet. These are the Nazca lines, geoglyphs so vast that their true form only coalesces when viewed from hundreds of feet in the air. From the ground, you see only shallow trenches and indistinct paths wandering across the desert. But from above, the lines resolve into a breathtaking menagerie: a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with impossibly long, articulated legs, a twisting monkey with a spiraled tail, and a condor with a wingspan that seems to embrace the valley. They were created by the Nazca culture over a 1,000-year period, beginning around 500 years before the Common Era. The sheer physical act of their creation is a marvel of persistence and precision. Using simple tools and careful planning, teams of people cleared an estimated 10 to 15 centimeters of surface rock across thousands of square meters for a single figure, moving and organizing tons of material. The stability of the hyper-arid climate has preserved their work for 2 millennia, but the enduring question, the one that has fueled speculation for nearly a century since their rediscovery by aircraft, is a profound one of intent. Why would a people invest such colossal effort to create art they could never see in its entirety? The most widely supported theories are rooted in the spiritual worldview of the Nazca. For a culture deeply connected to the cycles of water and fertility in an unforgiving desert, the lines likely served as a sacred landscape, a giant ritual space. Some researchers propose they functioned as processional pathways for ceremonies, where communities would walk the lines to invoke deities associated with the figures. perhaps the spider as a symbol of rain or the hummingbird as a bringer of life. Others see them as a vast astronomical calendar, with certain lines aligning with the rising and setting points of the sun, moon, and significant stars during solstices, turning the entire plain into an observatory for marking time and organizing agricultural cycles. This explanation highlights their extraordinary surveying skill, achieved with simple stakes and cords, proving a sophisticated understanding of geometry and perspective long before the invention of flight. Yet, the very fact that their full glory is only visible from a perspective the Nazca could not physically achieve adds a layer of deep spiritual significance. This suggests the art was not for human eyes at all, but for the eyes of the gods they believed resided in the sky. The lines were offerings, prayers made permanent, meant to be seen from above by celestial beings who controlled the rain and ensured the harvest. This idea challenges a modern, human-centered view of art and purpose. It asks us to consider a form of communication that transcends the audience of the living, a project whose ultimate witness was not the maker but the divine. The Nazca lines, therefore, are more than ancient curiosities. They are a testament to a different way of perceiving humanity's place in the cosmos. They represent a long-term communal project whose scale was an act of faith, a dialogue between earth and sky written in lines so large they required the patience of generations to complete. They force us to wonder what other messages from the past are written not in words or walls, but on the grand, open pages of the land itself, waiting for us to rise high enough to finally read them. The vast desert canvases of Nazca speak of a culture communicating with the heavens, but on a remote island in the Pacific, the stone faces of Rapa Nui, known as Easter Island, seem to tell a story directed squarely at us. For decades, the narrative surrounding the Moai has been a powerful and pervasive parable. It is a story you likely know, a stark warning of ecological hubris. According to this tale, a once thriving Polynesian society became obsessed with carving and transporting these colossal stone statues. In their fervor, they cut down every last palm tree on the island to use as rollers and levers, triggering catastrophic soil erosion, the collapse of agriculture, and ultimately, a descent into societal chaos and conflict. The silent Moai, staring inland from their platforms, were framed as monuments to a people's self-destruction, a civilization that literally sawed off the branch it was sitting on. This ecocide narrative is compelling and morally instructive, but a growing body of archaeological evidence suggests it is also profoundly incomplete and in many ways unfair to the Rapa Nui people themselves. Recent research is unraveling that simplistic story thread by thread, revealing a far more nuanced and resilient history. Core samples from the island's lakes and analysis of ancient botanical remains do show deforestation, but they also reveal something crucial. The process was gradual, spanning centuries, and not necessarily the direct, single-minded cause of societal failure. More importantly, archaeologists have uncovered widespread evidence of sophisticated adaptation. The islanders developed extensive rock gardens, known as lithic mulching, where they strategically placed volcanic stones across fields. This technique conserved precious moisture, regulated soil temperature, and enriched the earth with minerals, creating sustainable plots for growing sweet potatoes and other crops. This was not the practice of a society blindly consuming its resources, but of one actively and ingeniously managing them. So what really happened on Rapa Nui? The emerging picture is not one of a sudden, dramatic collapse, but of a long, difficult, and successful adaptation to changing circumstances. As the environment shifted, partly through natural climate variation and partly through human activity, the society transformed. The grand statue-building era, which required immense communal effort and resources, gradually came to an end, but the people did not vanish. They shifted their cultural focus. The later period saw the rise of the Birdman cult, a new religious tradition centered on an annual competition to retrieve the first sooty-tern egg from a nearby islet. This was a profound pivot from monumentalism to a different kind of ritual, one that reflected a changed relationship with their island world. The idea of a violent, resource war-driven collapse is also being reassessed. Analysis of tools found at sites once interpreted as battlefields now suggests many were more likely general-purpose implements, not weapons. While periods of hardship certainly occurred, the evidence points more toward continuous cultural evolution than apocalyptic civil war. This revised understanding forces a dramatic reframing. The Moai should not be seen solely as tombstones for a failed society. They are, first and foremost, symbols of astonishing cultural achievement and endurance. Their creation required not just physical labor, but a complex social organization, a shared spiritual vision, and a mastery of geology and engineering that allowed them to carve, transport, and erect figures averaging 13 feet tall and weighing 14 tons, with the largest standing over 30 feet high. To reduce this accomplishment to a parable of folly is to miss its true significance. The story of Rapa Nui challenges our deep-seated need for simple moral lessons from the past. It asks us to move beyond the stereotype of the naive native who destroyed his own paradise. Instead, we see a people who, like all human societies, impacted their environment, faced serious challenges, and responded with innovation and cultural change. Their legacy is not a warning about stone statues, but a testament to human resilience in one of the most isolated places on Earth. The Moai do not stare blankly from a wasteland of their own making. They gaze across an island that sustained a people for centuries through adaptation and transformation, and they silently challenge us to look deeper, to see endurance where we once only saw collapse. Beneath the clear, blue waters off the coast of Japan's westernmost island lies a formation that blurs the line between the work of nature and the hand of humanity. The Yonaguni monument is a colossal sandstone structure rising from the seafloor, its terraced faces, sharp edges, and flat platforms creating a silhouette that looks eerily architectural. Discovered by a diver in the 1980s, it has been a subject of intense debate ever since. To the trained eye of a geologist, the monument is a spectacular example of natural sandstone weathering. The region is seismically active, and powerful ocean currents have sculpted the bedrock over millennia, creating flat surfaces, step-like fractures, and 90-degree angles through purely physical processes like tidal scouring and joint cracking. The stone itself is sedimentary, with natural horizontal bedding planes that can erode into what appear to be perfectly level terraces. From this scientific perspective, Yonaguni is a masterpiece of geological chance, a natural sculpture of immense beauty but not intention. Yet, when you swim along its massive, 5-story high walls, other details give you pause. There are what look like 2 round holes that could have held pillars, a straight trench running for meters with a clean, internal corner, and a prominent platform that some have likened to a stage or altar. Proponents of the artificial origin theory argue that the concentration of these seemingly geometric features in one structure stretches the limits of natural coincidence. They suggest that during the last ice age, when global sea levels were over 100 meters lower, this area would have been dry land. Could an ancient culture have quarried and shaped this outcrop into a ceremonial center or a fortress, only for it to be swallowed by the rising seas as the glaciers melted around 10,000 years ago? This timeline, if proven, would place its construction in a prehistoric epoch far older than most conventional ancient monuments. The debate around Yonaguni is ultimately a profound lesson in perception and methodology. It forces us to ask a critical question that lies at the heart of archaeology. How do we definitively recognize human craftsmanship, especially after 10,000 years of submersion, erosion, and coral growth? Nature is a powerful and patient sculptor, capable of producing shapes that mimic human design. Without clear, unambiguous artifacts like tools, pottery, or carvings found in direct association with the structure, the evidence remains circumstantial and open to interpretation. The monument sits in a challenging middle ground, a Rorschach test in stone where one person sees a sunken city plaza and another sees the magnificent, random artistry of tectonic forces. This ambiguity itself is a valuable discovery. It highlights the delicate dance between two ways of seeing the past, reminding us that our desire to find lost civilizations must always be balanced with a rigorous respect for the immense creative power of the natural world. Whether a human creation or a geological wonder, the Yonaguni monument stands as a silent, submerged sentinel, guarding a secret about the ancient landscape and challenging us to refine the very tools we use to read the story of our planet. While the debate over Yonaguni centers on distinguishing nature from human hand, another discovery leaves no doubt about its artificial origin, only the profound complexity of its message. Buried for decades beneath a Scottish housing estate to protect it from vandalism, the Cochno stone re-emerged in 2015, a 5,000-year-old canvas of breathtaking mystery. This massive slab of sandstone, stretching nearly 13 meters in length, is not simply marked, it is saturated with artistry. Its surface is a dense tapestry of deeply carved symbols, a lexicon of the Neolithic mind. There are hundreds of cup marks, small circular depressions, often surrounded by concentric rings that ripple outward like waves from a dropped stone. These are connected by meandering grooves and punctuated by spirals that seem to spin with a silent, captured energy. While similar cup and ring-marked stones are found scattered across Atlantic Europe, from Ireland to Portugal, the Cochno stone is a masterpiece of the form. Its sheer scale and the incredible density of its carvings set it apart as one of the most significant prehistoric art panels in all of Europe. To stand before it is to stand before a text written in a language of geometry, a codex in stone waiting for its cipher. The immediate and compelling question is, what does it all mean? For over a century, interpretations have swirled like the patterns themselves. Some researchers, looking at the arrangement of cups, rings, and pathways, propose an astronomical function. Could this be a map of the heavens, charting constellations or celestial events important to the farming communities that created it? The spirals might represent the sun or the cyclical nature of the seasons, while the connecting grooves could trace the movements of planets or stars across the night sky. This theory frames the stone as a permanent observatory, a way to anchor cosmic knowledge to a specific, sacred place in the landscape. Other archaeologists see a more terrestrial purpose. The markings might delineate territorial boundaries, mapping the lands of different clans or signifying important meeting places. A more ritualistic interpretation suggests the stone was a focal point for ceremonies, where the cup marks held offerings of water, grain, or other precious substances, with the act of carving itself being a spiritual practice to connect with ancestors or natural forces. The grooves could then be seen as channels for symbolic energy or pathways for ritual movement. The truth is, we may never fully decrypt its original meaning. But that very indecipherability is its power. The Cochno stone directly confronts a persistent, subtle assumption about our distant ancestors, the idea that prehistoric life was a monolithic struggle for mere survival, leaving little room for abstract thought or large-scale artistic expression. This slab demolishes that notion. The investment of time and skill required to peck and grind these intricate patterns into solid stone, over what was likely generations, speaks to a priority that was not utilitarian. It was intellectual and spiritual. This was not doodling, it was deliberate, sustained communication. The community that created it chose to expend immense effort not on a tool or a weapon, but on a permanent record of their cosmology, their understanding of how the world worked. This shifts our perception of the past from a timeline of simple technological advances to a richer tapestry of parallel developments, where philosophical inquiry and artistic representation were as fundamental to human society as the search for food and shelter. The stone does not just show us that they could carve, it shows us that they needed to, that expressing complex ideas about the universe and humanity's place within it was a vital act. In its silent, swirling patterns, the Cochno stone offers a humbling lesson that the drive to make meaning, to leave a mark that says we were here, and this is what we wondered about, is perhaps one of the oldest and most defining human traits of all. The swirling patterns of the Cochno stone represent a conscious human mind leaving a mark, but what of the marks left upon us, written not in rock but in the very blueprint of life? The story of human origins is no longer just one of bones and tools. It is now also a story written in code, a genetic narrative that has rewritten the first chapters of our existence. In a remote cave high in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, archaeologists uncovered a few unremarkable fragments, a piece of a finger bone and a couple of teeth. Physically, they told us little, but their genetic material told a story that shattered a long-held paradigm. Through advanced sequencing, researchers discovered these bones belonged not to early Homo sapiens, nor to Neanderthals, but to an entirely separate branch of the human family tree, a group now known as the Denisovans. For all intents and purposes, they are a ghost lineage, a species known almost exclusively from their DNA. Yet this ghost is very much alive today, walking among us. The analysis revealed something astonishing. Modern human populations, particularly across Melanesia, Aboriginal Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia, carry significant traces of Denisovan DNA within their own genetic makeup. This is not a vague ancestral link. It is clear evidence of interbreeding, of intimate encounters between our direct ancestors and these other kinds of people. This single genetic fact dismantles the old, comforting image of human evolution as a straight, progressive line from primitive ancestor to modern human, with one species neatly replacing the last. Instead, it paints a picture of a crowded, complex world. For tens of thousands of years, multiple human species shared the planet: Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in the East, Homo sapiens spreading from Africa, and likely others whose stories are still lost. They met, they interacted, they exchanged culture and technology, and sometimes they formed families. This genetic legacy forces a profound rethink of what prehistory even means. If different kinds of humans with different cognitive and cultural capacities were all present and interacting, then the spark of what we call civilization, the drive toward complex language, art, and social structures, may not have been a unique invention of our specific lineage. It could have been a potential realized in parallel, a flame that flickered in multiple hearths, only one of which survived to light the modern world. The implications are staggering. It means that pieces of other human stories, other ways of being and seeing the world, are woven into the fabric of who we are today. The Denisovan DNA within certain populations is more than a biological curiosity. It is a living archive, a fragment of a lost library carried in the cells of millions. This discovery moves archaeology from the external to the internal, from what we left behind to what we carry within. It challenges the very notion of us and them in the deep past, revealing a history of connection and mixture that makes our ancestry far richer and far more mysterious than we ever imagined. We are not the pure product of a single, isolated evolutionary journey. We are the heirs to a grand, ancient mosaic, and some of the most precious tiles in that mosaic come from ghosts we are only now learning to see. Far from the genetic legacy of Denisovans, another tangible echo of ancient movement lay preserved in the dry sands of Western China. The Tarim Basin is one of the most arid places on Earth, a vast desert where the dry air and alkaline soil can halt decay for millennia. Here, archaeologists made a discovery that stopped them in their tracks. From the graves emerged individuals so perfectly preserved they seemed merely asleep, their facial features, hair, and clothing intact. But it was their appearance that rewrote a map. These mummies, some dating back as early as 1800 years before the Common Era, possessed distinctly Caucasian features, tall stature, and hair ranging from reddish-brown to blonde. They were dressed in finely woven woolen textiles, including colorful plaid patterns and felted hats that would not look out of place in the Celtic world. Their very presence in the heart of what is now China presents a historical paradox of the first order. The long-held assumption was that East Asia remained largely isolated from Western peoples until the opening of formal trade corridors like the Silk Road, which began around the 2nd century before the Common Era. These mummies predate that by well over 1,000 years. Who were these people? Linguistic and genetic studies point toward a connection with the Tocharians, an Indo-European speaking people known from later manuscripts found in the region. They were not brief visitors or a lost caravan. The evidence suggests they established settled communities, farming and herding along now-vanished rivers, maintaining their distinct culture and physical traits for centuries. This single fact unravels a simplistic, static view of the ancient world. It challenges the clean, colored maps that show monolithic blocks of culture with clear boundaries between East and West. Instead, the Tarim mummies paint a picture of astonishing prehistoric mobility. Long before empires built roads or organized long-distance trade, people were on the move across the vast Eurasian steppe, carrying their languages, their technologies, and their very genes across continents. These journeys were not the exception, but likely a fundamental rhythm of ancient life. The implications are profound for our understanding of cultural development. It means ideas, weaving techniques, metallurgical knowledge, and perhaps even early religious concepts could have flowed along these ancient, unofficial highways long before history bothered to record them. The isolation we often project onto ancient societies may be more a reflection of our own limited records than their reality. The Tarim mummies are not anomalies, they are messengers. They sit silently at a crossroads, forcing us to redraw our mental atlas of the ancient world. They reveal a landscape not of isolated tribes, but of a surprisingly connected and diverse human tapestry, where the meeting of East and West was not a moment in the Han Dynasty, but a process that began in the deep mists of prehistory, written in the strands of red hair and the weave of a plaid cloak preserved under a relentless desert sun. The shifting deserts and sunken coastlines of our planet hold stories of ancient movement, but perhaps the most compelling tales are those that refuse to stay submerged. In the warm, silt-laden waters of the Gulf of Cambay, off India's western coast, modern technology brushed against a legend. During a routine geological survey, sonar images did not show a smooth seabed. Instead, they revealed something startling: the outlines of large, geometrical structures spread across nearly 5 square miles. Follow-up dredging brought up more than sediment. It recovered man-made artifacts, including construction materials, beads, and pieces of pottery. But the true shock came from the laboratory. Wood samples recovered from the site were subjected to carbon dating, and the results sent a tremor through the archaeological community. The material dated to approximately 7,500 years before the Common Era. That is a date that precedes the great urban centers of the Indus Valley civilization, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, by several thousand years. This discovery did not just add a new chapter to Indian history, it suggested an entirely missing prologue. For millions of people, however, this was not a new discovery at all, but a potential confirmation of a very old story. In the rich tapestry of Hindu scripture, there exists the legendary city of Dwarka. It is described as a magnificent, fortified metropolis built by the deity Krishna on the western coast. The ancient texts speak of its grandeur, its wide roads, and its beautiful palaces. And then they tell of its fate, that after Krishna's departure from the world, the great city was swallowed by the sea. For centuries, this was understood as sacred mythology, a powerful metaphor within a spiritual tradition. The underwater structures in the Gulf of Cambay, for many, are not a coincidence. They are seen as the physical remains of that fabled city, a place where myth and material evidence appear to converge. This idea, of course, is met with intense scholarly debate. The site is extremely difficult to study systematically due to strong currents and low visibility, and some researchers caution that the sonar images could be interpreted as natural geological formations. The dating of the wood, while compelling, does not by itself prove the existence of a city, only human activity in the area at that remote time. Yet, even with these necessary cautions, the discovery forces a profound and universal question. How do we evaluate the relationship between ancient stories and physical evidence? The tale of a great city lost to the waves is not unique to India. It echoes in flood myths and sunken land stories across countless cultures worldwide. The Dropa findings challenge us to consider that these stories might not be pure invention. They could be distant, cultural memories of real, catastrophic events, passed down through hundreds of generations. At the end of the last ice age, global sea levels rose dramatically, inundating vast coastal plains that were once home to human settlements. What if the legend of Dropa preserves a kernel of historical truth about such an event, a traumatic loss of homeland that was woven into the spiritual identity of a people? This does not mean accepting every detail of the scripture as literal history, but rather acknowledging that oral traditions can be vessels for profound historical experiences. The search for Dropa, therefore, is about more than finding walls underwater. It is an exploration of the longevity of human memory. It asks us to consider if the deepest roots of our oldest stories might not be planted in imagination alone, but in the very real soil of forgotten shores, now lying silent beneath the sea, waiting for our technology to give them a voice once more. 24 caverns lie hidden beneath a quiet Chinese village, an empire carved in reverse. In 1992, a local farmer decided to pump the water out of what everyone assumed was a small, deep pond. What he revealed was not a natural pool, but the entrance to a staggering, artificial world. This was the first glimpse of the Longyu Grottos, a subterranean complex of such immense scale and precision that it seems to defy both physics and history. Each of the 24 caves is a monumental room hand-carved from solid, homogeneous siltstone. They are vast, some covering areas larger than a modern basketball court, with ceilings soaring up to 30 meters high, supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars that appear to hold up the very mountain. The walls and ceilings are not rough-hewn, but finished with a breathtaking, uniform artistry. They are covered from floor to ceiling in a parallel series of precise chisel marks, each about the width of a hand, creating a mesmerizing, rippling pattern that flows across every surface like a petrified ocean wave. This was not mere excavation, it was an act of obsessive, monumental decoration. The sheer volume of rock removed is almost incomprehensible, estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. To put that in perspective, that is enough stone to build a pyramid half the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And yet, here is the silence that swallows all sound. There is not a single historical record, not one line in any local chronicle or imperial archive that mentions the construction of this underground labyrinth. No legends, no folk songs, no tax records for the labor, no accounts of the tools or the master architects. It is a historical ghost, a project of staggering ambition that somehow left no footprint in the written memory of an empire famous for its meticulous record-keeping. Who built this and why? The theories are as vast as the chambers themselves. The consistent, angled chisel marks have led some to speculate it was a massive, ancient mining operation, perhaps for a special type of stone. But this explanation falters before the obvious question: why would miners invest such extraordinary effort to decorate every single inch of their quarry with such beautiful, uniform artistry? A more regal theory proposes it was a secret tomb complex for an emperor or a noble family, a hidden necropolis meant to rival those above ground. Yet no sarcophagi, no burial goods, no human remains of any kind have ever been found within the echoing halls. Perhaps it was a secret communal space, a sanctuary for a religious sect, or a hidden storage facility for an entire region, carved in utter secrecy, but the logistics boggle the mind. The removal of that much rock would have required the labor of thousands of workers, working for decades, generating tons of rubble that had to be disposed of without a trace. The Longyou grottos present a paradox that cuts to the heart of how we understand the past. We rely on records, on artifacts, on the stories passed down to piece together history. This complex stands as a monumental rebuke to that method. It proves that something enormous, something that would have been the defining project of a generation, can vanish completely from the collective record. It forces a humbling and thrilling possibility that our historical timeline is not just missing footnotes, but entire missing volumes. The grottos are not just empty caves, they are containers for a forgotten ambition, holding the echo of a command given thousands of years ago, and the silent, swirling testimony of every chisel stroke that answered it. They ask us, what else have we simply forgotten? The silent testimony of the Longyou grottos speaks of a forgotten past, but in the dry valleys of Peru, another set of stones arrived with a story that was impossible to ignore. In the 1960s, a local farmer named Basilio Ashuya began selling a collection of carved andesite stones to tourists and collectors. These were the Ica stones, and their imagery was not of gods or animals, but of scenes that seemed to leap from a science fiction novel. On their dark, polished surfaces, human figures were depicted in clear, active coexistence with creatures that bore a striking resemblance to dinosaurs, including Triceratops and what looks like a flying pterodactyl. Other stones showed what appeared to be advanced medical knowledge, with detailed carvings of procedures resembling heart transplants and cesarean sections, complete with what could be interpreted as surgical tools. Still others illustrated astronomers using telescopes to gaze at celestial bodies. If authentic, these stones would not just rewrite history, they would shatter it, suggesting a lost civilization with knowledge of paleontology and technology that defies all conventional timelines. The scientific and archaeological community responded with swift and nearly unanimous skepticism. Geologists who examined the stones noted that the dark patina, or surface coating, on the carved grooves appeared fresh and inconsistent with centuries of natural weathering, suggesting the engravings were modern. When pressed, Basilio Ashuya himself eventually confessed to creating the stones as forgeries, using a dental drill and claiming he was inspired by comic books and textbooks to craft the designs. He stated his motivation was purely economic, to create curiosities that would provide an income. For mainstream archaeology, the case was closed, a clear example of a modern hoax designed to capitalize on public fascination with ancient mysteries and extraterrestrial theories. Yet the story of the Ica stones does not end with a simple confession. Ashuya later recanted his admission, creating a cloud of uncertainty that true believers cling to. This back and forth transforms the stones from a mere curiosity into a profound case study in how we authenticate the past. They sit at the exact intersection of desire and evidence. They represent everything some wish were true, a past where humans walked with giants and possessed futuristic wisdom. This powerful desire can override critical scrutiny, leading individuals to dismiss the overwhelming evidence of forgery in favor of a more thrilling narrative. The stones challenge the very processes of validation, forcing us to ask, What evidence would ever be sufficient to prove such an extraordinary claim? When a single, sensational artifact contradicts the entire accumulated framework of geology, biology, and archaeology, the burden of proof rests overwhelmingly on the artifact itself. In this case, the stones failed every test of provenance, the detailed record of an object's discovery, location, and context, which is the bedrock of credible archaeology. They appeared not from a documented dig, but from a farmer's pocket. Ultimately, the Ica stones serve as a crucial cautionary tale, not about the past, but about our relationship with it. They highlight the tension between our hunger for wonder and the disciplined, often slow, work of historical reconstruction. The desire to rewrite history is a powerful force, and sometimes, as this case suggests, that desire can lead not to discovery, but to fabrication. They test the boundaries of credible inquiry, reminding us that while an open mind is essential, it must be balanced with a critical eye. The real lesson of the Ica stones is not about dinosaurs or ancient surgeons. It is about the importance of context, the rigor of the scientific method, and understanding that the most compelling stories about our past are those supported by a chorus of evidence, not just a single, sensational whisper from a stone. The hills near Visoko possess a geometry that feels almost too perfect. With their steep, triangular faces and unnaturally flat summits, they do not look like the rolling, organic shapes we expect from nature. This striking appearance ignited a modern firestorm when, in 2005, an amateur researcher named Semir Osmanagic declared them not hills at all, but the world's oldest and largest pyramids constructed by a lost civilization more than 12,000 years ago. He pointed to the alignment of their slopes with cardinal directions, the presence of what he called concrete blocks and paved tunnels, and a sense of scale that dwarfed the Great Pyramid of Giza. For many in Bosnia and around the world, this was a thrilling revelation, a chance to claim a piece of ancient, monumental glory for a region recovering from recent hardship. The idea took powerful root, spawning a tourist industry, inspiring volunteer excavations, and capturing the global imagination with the promise of rewriting history on an epic scale. Mainstream science, however, responded with a unified and unequivocal verdict. Teams of geologists from across Europe conducted surveys and analyses. Their conclusion was definitive: the structures are entirely natural. They are what geologists call flatirons, a common geological formation created by the erosion of sedimentary layers, which can produce strikingly symmetrical slopes and flat tops. The so-called concrete was identified as natural conglomerate rock, and the tunnels were found to be pre-existing medieval mines or natural fissures. Every piece of evidence presented by the pyramid proponents was, according to the scientific consensus, either misinterpreted or explained by well-understood geological processes. This standoff is about far more than rocks and radiocarbon dates. The Bosnian pyramid controversy illuminates a profound and modern challenge in how we uncover and accept the past. It is a case study in the powerful collision between rigorous, methodical science and the deep human desires that alternative narratives often fulfill. For a nation seeking a positive, unifying identity and a source of pride, the pyramid story offered a tangible connection to a majestic, ancient heritage. It provided a narrative of importance and resilience that resonated on a cultural and emotional level, a story that felt more immediately meaningful than a dry geological report. This highlights a critical tension: the scientific process, which advances through skepticism, peer review, and the slow accumulation of evidence, often struggles to communicate its findings in a way that competes with the emotional appeal of a grand, revolutionary tale. The controversy forces us to examine how scientific consensus is formed and why it is sometimes rejected. It is not a cabal of closed-minded experts. but a collective judgment built on reproducible evidence, established principles, and the painstaking work of ruling out other possibilities. When that consensus is dismissed as dogma or elitism, it creates a rift where two sides are not even debating on the same factual field. One operates on the rules of evidence, the other on the power of belief and identity. This does not mean all established theories are forever correct. Science itself evolves with new evidence, but the change comes from within the framework, from data that withstands the same rigorous scrutiny. The hills of Visoko, therefore, stand as a monument to a different kind of human endeavor, our need for wonder and our search for significance in the landscape. They challenge us to hold two ideas in balance, to remain open to the possibility of the extraordinary, while also respecting the disciplined tools we have built to separate extraordinary fact from compelling fiction. The true discovery here may not be about ancient builders, but about understanding the very human stories we choose to tell about the ground beneath our feet, and why we so desperately want some of them to be true. The drive to carve our legacy into stone finds perhaps its most eloquent expression not in a grand facade, but in a single, perfect puzzle piece. Embedded in a wall in Cusco, Peru, a stone known as the 12-angle stone stands as a quiet masterpiece of Inca engineering. It is not a massive block, but its complexity is breathtaking. The stone is carved with 12 distinct, impeccably straight edges, each one fitting flush against the faces of the surrounding stones in a seamless, three-dimensional jigsaw. This is not merely decorative artistry, it is structural genius of the highest order. The Andes Mountains are one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, and the Inca lived with the constant reality of the ground moving beneath them. A wall made of simple rectangular blocks stacked with mortar would crack and crumble under such stress. But a wall built like this one, with each stone a unique polygonal shape locking into its neighbors on multiple planes, behaves differently. When an earthquake's energy passes through, the entire structure flexes and settles as a unified, resilient mass, the stones dancing together rather than breaking apart. The precision required to achieve this is almost beyond comprehension. The Inca had no iron chisels, no powered saws, no laser levels. Their tools were stone hammers, bronze alloys that were softer than the andesite they were shaping, and abrasive sand for grinding. Creating the 12-angle stone was an act of profound patience and foresight. It required a deep, intuitive understanding of geometry, of how stress fractures move through rock, and of how to shape a material by working with its natural grain. This knowledge was not written in a textbook, it was held in the hands and minds of master masons, passed down through generations of apprenticeship. Each strike of the hammer was informed by centuries of accumulated empirical wisdom, of learning what worked through trial, observation, and the hard lessons of collapsed walls. This single stone challenges a persistent, modern bias, the assumption that precision and technological sophistication are only possible with hard metal or machinery. The Inca achieved a level of architectural perfection that modern engineers still admire, using what we would consider simple tools. Their technology was not in the instrument, but in the applied intellect, in the generations of refined technique and profound observation of the physical world. The 12-angle stone is more than a building block, it is a testament to a different kind of knowledge, one written in angles and friction, a permanent answer to the trembling earth carved in silent, immovable stone. Our genetic code is a living archive, a molecular diary of journeys taken long before history was written. While the silent stones of Sacsayhuamán and the sunken lines of Nazca show us where ancient people built, the story within our DNA reveals where they walked and when. Recent leaps in genetic analysis are not just adding footnotes to the human story, they are rewriting entire chapters, particularly the epic narrative of how we populated the planet. For decades, the Out of Africa model provided a powerful framework, a broad brushstroke of a single major migration that gave rise to the world's populations. But the devil, as they say, is in the details, and those details are now emerging with stunning clarity from the sequencing of ancient bones. This invisible evidence is challenging the timeline we built from artifacts alone, suggesting that the peopling of continents was not a single event, but a symphony of multiple, complex waves. Consider the settlement of the Americas, the traditional archaeological story, supported by distinctive stone tool cultures like Clovis, pointed to a migration from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge around 13,000 years ago. Yet, genetic studies of both ancient remains and modern indigenous populations are painting a richer, more intricate picture. The data suggests not one, but at least two, and possibly more, distinct pulses of migration from Siberia into the Americas, separated by thousands of years. Some genetic lineages even hint at an earlier coastal migration route, with people moving south along the Pacific shoreline, perhaps even using boats long before the inland ice-free corridors opened. This genetic clock often ticks to a different rhythm than the archaeological one. A stone spear point found in a certain layer of soil gives us a date for when that tool was used there. But the genetic story in the bones of the person who used it can tell us where their ancestors came from and how long before that their lineage diverged from others. Sometimes these stories align beautifully, confirming the material record. Other times, they introduce a fascinating contradiction, a ghost population that left few physical traces but a significant genetic legacy. This forces a profound shift in how we understand prehistory. We can no longer rely solely on the tangible things left behind, the pottery shards, the hearths, the tools. We must now reconcile that evidence with the story written in our very cells. This multidisciplinary approach reveals a world far more dynamic and interconnected than a scattering of artifacts might suggest. The spread of a new type of arrowhead or a style of pottery was once seen as a slow diffusion of ideas from one settled tribe to its neighbor. Genetics now suggests that often the ideas moved because the people did, and they moved faster and farther than we ever imagined. The settlement of remote Oceania, the vast Pacific Islands, is a prime example. The archaeological record shows the incredible voyage of the Lapita people, marked by their distinctive pottery, spreading from near Papua New Guinea out to Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa around 3,000 years ago. Genetic studies confirm this journey, but they also reveal earlier exploratory voyages and later back migrations, a complex web of movement and contact that the pottery alone could never detail. This genetic narrative challenges a static view of ancient societies. It reveals that the map of the prehistoric world was not a patchwork of isolated cultures slowly evolving in place. It was a network constantly humming with movement, exchange, and mixture. Technologies, languages, and artistic styles did not simply drift. They were carried in the minds and in the bloodlines of people who crossed mountains, deserts, and oceans. The story told by our DNA is ultimately one of profound connection. It tells us that the barriers we imagine between ancient peoples were often porous, that encounters led not just to trade but to families, and that the legacy of those ancient meetings is still carried within billions of people today. The genetic clock does not just reset our timeline, it redefines the very plot of human history, transforming it from a series of isolated discoveries into an epic, global journey of countless intertwined threads. High in the thin air of the Bolivian Altiplano, the stones of Puma Punku do not simply rest, they declare a mystery in every clean, sharp edge. Part of the greater Tiwanaku complex, this site is not a collection of worn pillars or tumbled walls. It is a sprawling architectural graveyard of megalithic precision that feels utterly out of time. Scattered across the landscape are immense blocks of andesite and red sandstone, some weighing over 100 tons, but it is not their mass that confounds experts. It is their miniature perfection, The most famous of these are the so-called H blocks, named for their distinctive, recessed shape that resembles a capital letter H. These blocks are not rough-hewn. Their surfaces are flawlessly flat, their corners exact 90-degree angles, and their faces are decorated with a series of intricate, geometric cutouts, channels, and drilled holes that look as if they were made by a modern milling machine. The stone itself, particularly the andesite, is a volcanic rock of immense hardness comparable to granite. To shape it with such control, to create those recessed notches and those perfectly parallel grooves, using only stone hammers and copper chisels, seems almost beyond the realm of possibility. The precision is so consistent, so repeatable across multiple blocks, that it suggests the use of templates and a standardized manufacturing process, a concept we associate with industrial production, not ancient craftsmanship. This level of workmanship is not merely decorative, it is structural. The complex interlocking joints, the precise mortise and tenon fittings cut into the stone, indicate these blocks were meant to fit together like pieces of a giant, earthquake-resistant puzzle, forming walls or platforms of immense stability. The problem for archaeologists and engineers is the how. Experimental attempts to replicate these cuts and surfaces using tools and materials available to the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished from around 500 to 1,000 years after the Common Era, have consistently fallen short. The stone is too hard for copper tools to cut so deeply and cleanly, and the sheer flatness of the surfaces resists explanation through simple grinding and sanding alone. Some researchers point to the possibility of advanced, lost techniques, such as the use of specialized stone pounders that could fracture the rock along precise planes with repeated, controlled percussion. Others theorize about the use of abrasive slurries made from even harder minerals, applied with saws made of leather or wood, a process that would require immense time and labor but could achieve remarkable smoothness. Yet, even these explanations struggle to account for the uniform depth of the geometric channels or the perfection of the right-angle corners. Puma Punku, therefore, stands as a direct and tangible challenge to our reconstruction of technological history in the Andes. It forces a difficult question: did the Tiwanaku possess a suite of stone-working knowledge so refined, so effective, that it has been completely lost to time, leaving behind only these impossible stones as evidence of its existence? This is not necessarily a call for supernatural or alien intervention, but rather a humbling acknowledgement of the gaps in our understanding. Human ingenuity, when focused by generations of specialized craftsmen, can achieve results that later ages, looking back with different tools and assumptions, find inexplicable. The site compels us to reconsider the ceiling of pre-Columbian engineering. We often view ancient societies through the lens of their limitations, the tools they lack. Puma Punku asks us to look instead at the results they achieved, and to accept that our models for how they did it may still be incomplete. These silent, scattered blocks are not just rubble, they are a frozen moment of a high art in stone, a language of geometry and force whose grammar we have yet to fully decipher. The stone enigma of Puma Punku speaks of a lost technical manual, but the true language of our ancestors was written not in angles, but in color and shadow. In 1879, an amateur archaeologist named Marcelino Sanz de Sochuola was exploring a cave on his property in northern Spain. His young daughter, Maria, looked up at the low ceiling with a child's perspective, and her exclamation changed history. "Papa, look, oxen." What she saw were not crude scratches or simple outlines. They were magnificent charging bison, painted in vivid reds, blacks, and ochres, their forms swelling with volume and life, shaded to suggest muscle and movement. They were surrounded by graceful deer, wild boar, and mysterious symbols, a breathtaking gallery preserved in the silent dark for millennia. When Sacsayhuamán presented his findings, the reaction from the scientific establishment was not wonder but scornful dismissal. The paintings were too beautiful, too sophisticated, too artistically accomplished. The prevailing view of Paleolithic humans, informed by the crude stone tools that were the primary evidence of their existence, was that they were simple brutes, incapable of such refined expression. The experts declared the works a modern forgery, a cruel hoax that ruined Sacsayhuamán's reputation. It would take decades and the discovery of similar caves across Europe for science to finally accept the truth through carbon dating. The art of Altamira was not a fake. It was approximately 15,000 years old. This was more than just a correction of a date. It was a shattering of a deep-seated prejudice. Altamira challenged the very notion of a linear, evolutionary climb in human culture, the idea that art must have progressed from clumsy beginnings to later mastery. Here was proof that artistic genius, the capacity for symbolic thought, and the technical skill to execute it, was not a product of civilization, but a fundamental part of the human mind from its earliest chapters. The artists of Altamira were not primitive in their perception. They understood perspective, using the natural contours of the cave ceiling to give their animals a three-dimensional presence. They mastered complex paint recipes, mixing minerals with animal fat and water, and employed techniques like spraying pigment through hollow bones to create soft gradients. This was not doodling, it was a conscious, sophisticated tradition. The cave itself was likely a sacred space, a place of ritual and storytelling where the act of painting was as important as the image itself, perhaps a way to connect with the spirit of the animals they hunted or to ensure the cycle of life continued. Altamira forces us to abandon the condescending label of caveman art. It compels us to see those distant ancestors not as crude prototypes of ourselves, but as fully realized people with a rich interior world, a deep observation of nature, and an undeniable urge to translate their experience into something permanent and beautiful. They did not paint because they had spare time after survival. They painted because making meaning through image was, and is, an essential part of being human. That first Sistine Chapel, lit by flickering stone lamps, asks us a profound question about our own history. If the spark of such breathtaking artistry was already burning brightly 15,000 years ago, what other flames of intellect and emotion were glowing in the dark, waiting for us to stumble into their light? The deep, cold waters of the Great Lakes hide more than shipwrecks and geological history. In 2007, a team surveying the floor of Lake Michigan made a sonar discovery that sent ripples through the archaeological community. Their instruments revealed something startling, a series of large stones arranged in a deliberate circle, resting about 40 feet below the surface. The structure measured roughly 12 meters across, a geometric pattern that stood out starkly against the otherwise featureless lake bed. But one detail made the find truly extraordinary. On one of the larger stones, the sonar seemed to detect the carved outline of a massive creature, its form suggestive of a mastodon, an animal that vanished from North America over 10,000 years ago. This underwater cairn, if verified as human-made, would not be a simple fishing weir or a modern accident. It would be a prehistoric monument, a potential Stonehenge of the New World, silently preserved in a freshwater tomb. The implications are staggering. For such a carving to exist, the site would have to date to a time when humans shared the landscape with these Ice Age giants. More critically, the structure itself would have been built on dry land, at a period when Lake Michigan's water levels were dramatically lower, part of a vast, exposed continental shelf that was once a thriving, accessible landscape. This single sonar image opens a door to a forgotten world, a lost chapter of human habitation now completely submerged. The research, of course, is in its earliest stages and deeply controversial. Natural explanations are possible. The stones could be glacial erratics deposited in a coincidental pattern by retreating ice sheets, and the supposed carving could be a trick of the sonar shadows, a pareidolia where we see a familiar shape in random marks. Definitive proof requires physical examination by divers or submersibles, a challenging and costly endeavor in the deep, often murky waters. Yet, regardless of its final verdict, the Lake Michigan cairn performs a vital service. It forces a dramatic shift in our perspective. For over a century, archaeology has focused its gaze on dry land, on river valleys and cave systems and open plains. But this discovery reminds us that our map of the ancient world is missing enormous pieces. During the peak of the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked in glacial ice that global sea levels were over 100 meters lower than they are today. Vast stretches of what are now continental shelves, the gentle slopes connecting continents to the deep ocean, were not underwater. They were dry, fertile coastal plains, savannas, and forests, likely teeming with game and providing ideal corridors for human migration and settlement. These are not minor margins. They represent an area of landmass larger than the continent of Africa, a lost continent in all but name, now completely drowned by the melting glaciers. The implications for human history are profound. The most attractive places for early human communities have always been coastlines and river mouths, places rich in resources. It stands to reason that a significant percentage of all prehistoric human activity, perhaps even the majority of sites from certain eras, could now lie beneath the waves. Our entire narrative of human migration, particularly the peopling of continents like the Americas and Australia, which involved long coastal journeys, may be missing its most critical evidence: the campsites, tool workshops, and ceremonial grounds that line those now vanished shores. The Silent Circle in Lake Michigan is a messenger from that drowned world. It challenges archaeology to become as much a marine science as a terrestrial one, to look beyond the current coastline and imagine the lost landscapes where our ancestors once lived, loved, and built. It asks a humbling question: how much of the true story of human civilization is not buried in the earth we walk on, but lost forever under the silent, shifting weight of the sea? This final discovery is not carved in stone, but preserved in waterlogged wood, whispering a secret that could rewrite the very definition of history's starting line. In the quiet waters of Lake Castoria in northern Greece, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a Neolithic lakeshore village. Among the posts and tools, a humble piece of wood emerged, carbon dated to around 5,260 years before the Common Era. This is the Dispilio tablet, and its surface is not blank. It is inscribed with a series of clear, repeated symbols, arranged in linear sequences that look unmistakably like a form of writing. The sheer age of this object sends a tremor through the foundational narrative of human civilization. For over a century, the accepted story placed the invention of writing squarely in Mesopotamia, with the development of Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets around 3,200 years before the Common Era. This innovation was seen as the critical catalyst, the moment prehistory ended and recorded history began, enabling complex administration, law, and literature. The Dispilio tablet, however, predates that Mesopotamian milestone by over 2,000 years. If these symbols constitute a structured script, a true writing system, then the timeline of one of humanity's most pivotal inventions is not just wrong, it is profoundly incomplete. The tablet's markings are enigmatic, a code we have not yet cracked. Some symbols appear abstract, lines and angles, while others seem to vaguely resemble objects. They are organized, purposeful, not random scratches. The debate among scholars is intense. Skeptics argue the markings could be a form of elaborate property marking, a tally system, or ritual symbols without a full linguistic structure. Proponents, however, see the deliberate arrangement, the repetition of sign groups, as hallmarks of a proto-script, a system for recording language. This single piece of wood forces a radical reconsideration of a core assumption, that writing was invented once in one place and then spread outward to illuminate a waiting world. The Dispilio tablet suggests a very different possibility: the human drive to communicate complex information beyond speech, to make memory external and permanent, may be a universal cognitive leap, a spark that could ignite independently wherever societies reached a certain level of complexity. The Neolithic farmers of this lakeside village, with their organized community and their relationship with the natural world, may have felt the same need to record harvests, lineages, or myths as the scribes of Sumer did millennia later. This leads to an even more profound and unsettling implication. The tablet survived only because it fell into the oxygen-poor mud of the lakebed, a perfect environment for preserving organic material. In almost every other environment on Earth, wood, bark, bamboo, or leather decays within centuries, vanishing without a trace. What if the earliest experiments in writing were not on durable clay or stone, but on these perishable mediums? The Sumerians wrote on clay because it was abundant in their environment, and it hardened into a permanent record. But a culture in a forested region might have first carved symbols on wooden tablets or strips of bark. For every one Dispilio tablet that miraculously survived in a lake, how many thousands of others rotted away in the sun and rain, leaving no evidence that they ever existed? This idea transforms our search for origins. It means the archaeological record for something as fundamental as writing is catastrophically biased. We have found the earliest writing that happened to be made on materials that endure, not necessarily the earliest writing that was ever invented. The silent, sunken villages and lost forests of the ancient world may have been full of scribes we will never know. Their thoughts and stories return to the soil. The Dispilio tablet, therefore, is more than an artifact. It is a key to a missing library. It challenges the Mesopotamian-centric story not by claiming superiority, but by proposing plurality. It asks us to imagine a prehistoric world humming with multiple parallel experiments in symbolic communication, most of which have been erased by time. Our history is not a single line of progress from one bright point of invention. It is a vast, dark tapestry, and we have only ever seen the few threads that were woven with materials strong enough to last. This wooden fragment, pulled from the mud, is a ghost of a possibility, a whisper that the story of how we began to tell our stories is far older and far richer than the clay led us to believe. 25 discoveries, each a fracture in the timeline we thought we knew, and together they reveal a pattern far more profound than any single anomaly. This is not a collection of random errors in the historical record. It is a consistent, repeating signature, a fingerprint left on the past by forces we are only beginning to understand. The pattern tells us that human history does not follow a neat, upward-sloping line from simple to complex. Instead, it resembles a rugged mountain range with sudden, towering peaks of achievement, followed by deep valleys of forgetting. Civilizations like the builders of Göbekli Tepe or the creators of the Antikythera mechanism reached intellectual and technical heights that were, for reasons lost to time, not sustained. Their knowledge did not seamlessly transfer to the next chapter. It faded, sometimes vanishing completely, leaving later generations to reinvent the wheel or the gear or the concept of a city from scratch. This pattern of peak and loss challenges a core modern assumption, the idea of inevitable cumulative progress. It suggests that knowledge is not a permanent possession, but a fragile flame, easily extinguished by environmental shifts, by social upheaval, or simply by the passage of generations when the chain of teaching is broken. Alongside this rhythm of forgetting, the pattern reveals a stunning chorus of independent innovation. The seamless walls of Sacsayhuamán and the perfect spheres of Costa Rica were not inspired by shared blueprints from a common source. They were brilliant, separate answers to universal human questions about stability, community, and meaning, conceived in total isolation from one another. This tells us something fundamental about the human mind itself: the capacity for genius, for complex problem-solving and artistic expression, is not a cultural artifact that spread from a single point of origin. It is a latent potential, a set of tools inherent to our species, ready to be activated in vastly different environments when the right social and environmental conditions align. The pyramid arose in Egypt and the step temple arose in Mesopotamia, not because one copied the other, but because the human drive to build towards the heavens, to create a permanent axis between earth and sky, emerged independently in multiple hearts and minds. This diversity of solutions is a testament not to our divergence, but to a shared, underlying creativity. Ultimately, the collective weight of these mysteries teaches a necessary humility. For too long, we have viewed our distant ancestors through a condescending lens, as primitive prototypes slowly evolving toward our enlightened present. The evidence now demands we discard that view. The people who painted the lifelike bison of Altamira, who charted the stars with the Antikythera mechanism, or who engineered earthquake-proof polygonal walls were not less intelligent, less curious, or less profound than we are. They were our cognitive equals, facing a different set of constraints and opportunities, and applying their full intellectual power to the world as they found it. Their challenges were not simpler, just different: managing survival in an ice age, navigating vast oceans with celestial clues, organizing a society without written records. Their solutions, which we sometimes struggle to reverse engineer even with our technology, were perfectly adapted to their time and place. This reframing transforms history from a dry chronicle of facts we think we know into something far more alive and compelling, an ongoing detective story. The past is not a solved puzzle waiting on a shelf. It is an active crime scene scattered with clues that are often cryptic, sometimes contradictory. Our task is not to force these clues to fit a pre-written narrative, but to listen to what each artifact, each genetic marker, each submerged structure is actually trying to tell us, even when it whispers a truth that contradicts our textbooks. This is the real invitation extended by these 25 discoveries: to embrace the mystery itself, to find wonder not in having all the answers, but in the endless, thrilling process of asking better questions, of looking at a familiar landscape with new eyes, and understanding that the greatest story ever told, the story of us, still has most of its pages waiting to be turned. From the temple that predates farming to the computer that predates the Renaissance, these 25 discoveries are far more than a list of oddities. They are signposts, and they all point in the same direction, toward a human story that is infinitely richer, more complex, and more mysterious than any single textbook could ever contain. They remind us that civilization is not a single, unbroken thread of progress leading neatly from the Stone Age to the smartphone. It is a vast, tangled web, woven from countless threads of independent innovation, brilliant adaptation, heartbreaking loss, and unexpected rediscovery. The past is not a static record, a book already written and closed. It is an active, living conversation, a constant dialogue between what we pull from the earth and what we thought we understood. Every time a new artifact emerges from the mud or a new genetic sequence is decoded, the conversation changes. We are not merely reading history, we are participating in it, revising the story of ourselves with every fresh discovery. As we conclude this journey, hold onto that sense of possibility. Remember that the next discovery that will rewrite our understanding of who we are could be just a shovel's depth away, lying in a farmer's field, hidden in a cave, or resting on the ocean floor, waiting for its moment to challenge another one of our fundamental assumptions. If this exploration of humanity's hidden chapters has intrigued you, Consider joining us for more journeys into history's greatest enigmas. We would love to hear your thoughts as well, so please share which of these discoveries challenges your own world view the most in the comments below. The conversation about our past is never over, and your perspective is a valuable part of it.